Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We're gathered today on the 18th of the 10th month on our Creator's calendar, which is the 27th of December 2025 on the Gregorian calendar. And we are continuing with our reading of Deuteronomy or Debarim. At this point, the recording for last week's video isn't up yet. I had two videos. I'm very sorry. I'm going to get those uploaded with this. So please forgive me for that. I'm not very good at editing at all. I don't know how to do it. And I wanted to try to splice those together, but I just don't have time right now. But either way, we're reading through Debarim or Deuteronomy, which is Moshe's recapitulation of what they had gone through, what the children who are now men had all witnessed and seen from their youth on, to reinforce obedience and belief in their minds so that they can go in and do the things that are required of them, be obedient to the word, and be successful in everything they put their hand to. When they stray from that, when they deviate in any way, disaster for the people. But as they reform and have obedience, perfection of way, even if they're not perfect themselves, he makes them perfect and they're able to do things that they would otherwise not be able to. And that is the example for us to learn from. It is the future that we're going to be walking out when he comes for a perfect people, a bride made ready, right? But chapter 11, it says, therefore you shall love Yahuwah your Elohim, and shall observe his appointments. That would be his charge right there. And his ordinances, and his commandments, and his judgments always. And you shall know this day, for not to your children, who know not and have not seen the discipline of Yahuwah your Elohim and his wonderful works, and his strong hand, and his high arm, and his miracles, and his wonders which he wrought in the midst of Mitzrayim or Egypt, on Pharaoh king of Egypt, and all his land. And what he did to the host of the Mitzrayites, and to their chariots, and their cavalry, and their host, how he made the water of the Red Sea to overwhelm the face of them as they pursued after you, and Yahuwah destroyed them until this day. And all the things which he did to you in the wilderness until you came into this place. Which, if you go check out what Stephen says in the book of Acts, when he talks about he gave them up to the worship of the whole host of the heavens. After they forsook him those 10 times and they rejected him, they did not listen to the word to go into the land when he told them to, he said that he would not have any of that generation enter into the promised land. He took him back out into the wilderness and they all died off for the next 38 years there. It was during that time that they were worshiping the whole host of the heavens, and you don't have one reference of them keeping the feasts of Yahuwah in the wilderness then. Um, you don't get a whole lot of detail of what's happening right here. You have to see it in different places here and there to figure it out, and you don't get the accusation until the renewed covenant because it was intentionally hidden, whether through the machinations of men trying to hide things or the culmination of Satan's instigation, because that's ultimately what is the responsible party for all error is Satan. That's in scripture. The point being, it was a reflection of the truth, made unrecognizable as he foretold would happen. But there's quite a few instances. Another one is all the accusations of how they abused the foretellers and they killed and murdered a whole bunch of people. You don't have where they sawed someone in half unless it's the apocryphal writings that were removed. You don't have where there was unrighteous judges that were condemning innocent people unless you look at the apocryphal writings that were removed. And the fact that they were tampered with to discredit them was written and known about by believers after our Mashiach came. I believe Tertullian and some others have writings about how the Yahudim discredited these writings by tampering with them and then removed them so they would not seem legitimate, especially or in particular the ascension of Yeshayahu, where he's sawn in twine. And in there, in particular, you have quite a few allusions to the coming of our Mashiach being hidden and his return into glory, if you will, or into esteem up into the seventh Shamayim. But to continue here, it says, and all the things that he did to Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Aholiab, the son of Reuben, whom the earth opened her mouth, swallowed up, and their houses and their tents, and all their substance that was with them, in the midst of all Yisrael. This is a foreshadowing of what the French would do to the sons of Yahusuf, Germany, Britain, and America, if you will. It's a type of what would happen during the wilderness in antagonistic to the truth. It's just like the patriarchs fighting to sell Yahusuf into slavery was a type of what was going to happen later on. You see it in their children as an echo, and it was going to echo later on even more so. It says, for your eyes have seen all the mighty works of Yahuwah which he wrought among you today. And you shall keep all his commandments, as many as I command you today, that you may live and be multiplied, and that you may go in and inherit the land, into which you go across the Yarden to inherit it, that you may live long upon the land which Yahuwah sware to your fathers to give them, and to their seed after them, a land flowing with milk and honey. For the land into which you go to inherit it is not as the land of Mitzrayim, whence you came out, whensoever they sow the seed and water it with their feet, as a garden of herbs. But the land into which you go to inherit it is a land of mountains and plains. It shall drink water of the rain of Shamayim, a land which Yahuwah your Elohim surveys continually. The eyes of Yahuwah your Elohim are upon it from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. Now, if you will indeed hearken to all the commands which I charge you this day, to love Yahuwah your Elohim, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul, then he shall give you, or to you, land the earth, or sorry, then he shall give to your land the early and latter rain in its season. And this blessing is conditional. If, then, that is exactly like computer programming. If then statements are conditional. If it doesn't, then it won't. It's pretty simple, but that's how reality functions here. And they actually had this is a known thing in history. When the Yahudim were having famines in the land, when the Israeli were having famines in the land, it was because they were not getting the early and latter rains in its season, because they were not hearkening to his commandments. And when the land became desolate, when it became a wasteland and a curse amongst all peoples, and it was like that for many years, there was no latter rain, period, that entire time. When the people started fulfilling the foretellings that were required, that talked about the return of the Yahudim into the land, mentioned in the foretellers, mentioned in Revelation, you can see the fulfillment of that as it's talked about in Revelation from the Antichrist for Dummies series. But when that was coming to fruition, the latter rains literally, because of the obedience and will of the people turning their hearts back to the land, the latter rain was foretold to begin again. And it literally started shortly before and the earnest returning of the Yahudim to the area. excuse me, but it wouldn't have been possible for them to have the corn fruit or fields that they do without it. And that is by the providence of the Almighty. This is, and they shall give to your land the early and the latter rain in its season, and you shall bring in your corn and your wine and your oil, and he shall give food in your fields to your cattle. And when you have eaten and are full, take heed to yourself that your heart be not puffed up, and you transgress and serve other Elohim, the Elohim Akrim, right? And worship them. So the shakha right here is to depress or prostrate, pay homage there. And that's one word they have for the word for worship is to prostrate yourself. It says, and Yahuwah be angry with you and restrain the Shamayim, and there shall not be rain, and the earth shall not yield its fruit. Or there's an overabundance of rain and it saturates and there's too much, right? You can get too much of a thing and have it be a curse too. And you shall perish quickly from off the good land which Yahuwah has given you. And you shall store these words in your heart and in your inner being, and you shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and it shall be fixed before your eyes. And this is one of the mentions that I was talking about where those that tragically, I don't mean this to mock anybody, but it's a pattern. Those that reject the truth tend to invert things. They will literalize the spiritual and spiritualize the literal, where you are to store the words in your heart and in your soul, literal, and you bind them as a sign on your hand and fix them before your eyes, figurative, means that you have them in you and you do them. That you make sure you're in your actions and in the forethoughts of everything that you're putting your mind to. But you have some today that have rejected the truth that literally tie things on them as a sign. It's not the outward appearance that matters, though. That's what Scripture tells them. The inward man of the heart is what counts. It says, and you shall teach them to your children, so as to speak about them when you sit in the house, and when you walk by the way, and when you sleep, and when you rise up. And you shall write them on the lintels of your houses and on your gates, that your days may be long, and the days of your children, upon the land which Yahuwah sware to your fathers to give to them, as the days of Shamayim upon the earth, which is finite. There's a time where the firmament will melt, right? Our Mashiach says, the heavens and the earth will pass away, but my words by no means will pass away. And it shall come to pass that if you will indeed hearken to all these commands, which I charge you to observe this day, to love Yahuwah your Elohim, and to walk in all his ways, and to cleave close to him, then Yahuwah shall cast out all these nations before you, and you shall inherit great nations, and stronger than yourselves. Every place whereon the sole of your foot shall tread shall be yours, from the wilderness and Anti-Libanus, and from, which is the eastern part of Lebanon, right? The mountains there, and from the great river, the river Euphrates, even as far as the West Sea or the Mediterranean shall be your coasts. And at the largest part of their dominion, I believe during the time of Shalomo, and not fully extended that far, but during the time of Alexander Janus, they had their borders in their largest positions there. But it was not, I believe, as far as the Euphrates, where they had complete dominion and owned everything. It was just people were tributaries to them, particularly Shalomo. And then for Alexander Janus, after the Maccabean period, he had other kingdoms that were subject to him, Edom was given to him, for example, and he forced the Edomites to convert or leave, not kill them, but he said, if you want to stay here, you got to follow the laws. That was the gateway, however, for Herod coming to power, but that's for a different time. It says, no one shall stand before you, and Yahuwah your Elohim will put the fear of you and the dread of you on the face of all the land, on which you shall tread, as he told you. Behold, I set before you this day the baraka and the curse. The baraka, if you hearken to the commands of Yahuwah your Elohim, all that I command you this day, and the curse if you do not hearken to the commands of Yahuwah your Elohim. As many as I command you this day, and you wander from the way which I have commanded you, having gone to serve other Elohim, which you have not, or which you know not. And it shall come to pass when Yahuwah your Elohim shall have brought you into the land which you go over to inherit it, then you shall put baraka or blessing on Mount Gezerim, and the curse upon Mount Ebal. And the curse on Mount Ebal was written on a paper that was kept in a metal artifact that was found. It was discovered on that mountain from that era, where it has the words, the curses and everything were written in the name Yahu, Yod He Wah, Yod He Wah. It was missing the last letter, but it is one of the earliest recorded records of his name there. It goes along with like the Shasu, or the nomads of Yahu, who were the Midianites that we just mentioned, and I was sharing the videos about earlier this morning in the Telegram chat. But it was one of the earliest records we have when the children came into the land here. They say it was 1450s or so BC, or 1410s BC. It was 2,450 years from creation. And when they got on there, they were giving the baraka and the curses there on the mountains. And someone left that writing that was kept until today. And it has his name in the paleo there. But it only says Yahu, just like Yirmiyahu, Yeshayahu, um, Yahushaphat, Yahushua. It only has the Yahu part, not the actual ending of his name. It doesn't mean that the last part of his name, the Hey, does not exist. It just was not um, in those writings. Okay, I'm not trying to make any peculiar or weird doctrines out of that. Just it's a fact that is. And it mentions in a few places, by his name Yah, he shall go forward and do things. Yahu is a known short form of Yahuwah or Yahweh, right? Depending on the pronunciation there. But it says, lo, are not these beyond Yarden, behind, westward in the land of Canaan, which lies westward near Golgol by the high oak? Now, that could be Golgal, or the skull by the high oak, or the place of Mamre, the trees that Abraham were near. But I'm not sure about that. Okay, Gilgal. There we go. Gilgal is a known place. Different vowels here. Please forgive me. For you are passing over Yarden to go in and inherit the land which Yahuwah our Elohim gives you to inherit always, and you shall dwell in it. And you shall take heed to do all his ordinances, and these judgments, as many as I set before you today. And this is a recapitulation of the covenant, the same thing that was given at Sinai there. But chapter 12, monuments of idolatry are to be destroyed, the place of Elohim's service to be kept, which for our purposes, the dwelling place of Elohim is our body. We're to destroy idolatry from it and to keep our place clean. By all means, children, keep yourselves from idols, right? Blood is forbidden. The set apart things must be eaten in the set apart place, and the Luiim is not to be forsaken, and idolatry is not to be inquired after. Idolatry being the ways the nations serve or worship their mighty ones. It says, in these, which, if you don't recall, our Creator, He attributes idolatry to witchcraft because the two are synonymous. The more you learn about that, the more you literally know that's the case. But idolatry is associated with witchcraft, and it's alluded to as adultery. It is spiritual adultery, like when you would have a covenant with your spouse and then violate it with another. This is how he feels when we do these things to in regard to his worship. But he says, and these are the ordinances and the judgments which you shall observe to do in the land, which Yahuwah Elohim of your fathers gives you for an inheritance all the days which you live upon the land. You shall utterly destroy all the places in which they served their Elohim, whose land you inherit, on the high mountains and on the hills and under the thick tree. And you shall destroy their altars and break in pieces their pillars, and you shall cut down their groves, and you shall burn with fire the graven images of their mighty ones, and you shall abolish their name out of that place. You shall not do so to Yahuwah your Elohim. But in the place which Yahuwah your Elohim shall choose in one of your cities to name his name there, and to be called upon, you shall even seek him out and go there. Now, there's a reason for that. If you give me just one moment, I'll show you the purpose that he had. Please hold. So, this is the recognitions of Clement, and I was scrolling through talking to the group, but I thought I'd record this part too. The recognitions of Clement are like it's the preaching and teaching of Shimon Kepha, or Simon Peter, if you will. It was recorded by Clement of Rome, who later became a taught one of Shaul as well, and a missionary with them in Spain or Gaul. And then he later became the overseer of the Roman assembly and a martyr under the reign of Domitian, who was his cousin. He wrote the recognitions here. He wrote down first and second Clement to the Corinthians, and he wrote the apostolic constitutions, made copies of them as it was dictated. He didn't make up the stuff, but he was the one that composed them. And he also helped make copies of the Shepherd of Hermas, and have them published during that first era within the lifetime of some of the emissaries up to 90 AD when he was a martyr. Um, Back on point here. In the beginning book, Kepha he's reiterating all of history to their current generations again to him so that it's fresh in his mind. And in there, he's explaining things about what was going on in a way that's rather interesting. One thing that he mentions here is the reason that our Creator instituted the um, the appointed times and having it in one place, as you can see right here. I'm going to start with allowance of sacrifice for a time. And this is the Recognitions of Clement, Book 1, Chapter 36. When meantime Moshe, that trustworthy and wise steward, perceived that the vice of sacrifices to idols had been deeply ingrained into the people from their association with the Egyptians, or Mitzrayim, and that the root of this evil could not be extracted from them, he allowed them sacrifices, but permitted it to be done only to Yahuwah, that by any means he might cut off one half of the deeply ingrained evil, which was their delusions into the false worship of the way that Egypt did to their mighty ones. The ones that mixed of our forefathers were the ones that suffered their children being killed and going into captivity. The ones that did not mix were the Chaldeans that left beforehand. Um, forefathers of the people like the Kennedys, McIntoshes, Adamses, and many names that you might be familiar with, the McDonalds in our country, Stuarts, right? The what came from Scotland there. They were one of the righteous branches of the remnants of the Hebrews that were in Egypt that just left before the persecutions, before the captivity or the death of their sons. Some others might have left before then. I don't have records of it, but the ones that had caused problems suffered for it, and they were the ones crying out for help. They had ingrained evil, it mentions here, leaving the other half to be corrected by another and at a future time, by him, namely, concerning whom he said, or for a foreteller will Yahuwah your Elohim raise unto you, whom you will hear even as myself, according to all things that he will say to you. Whosoever will not hear that foreteller, his ruach will be cut off from his people. And that's in the Psalms, that he cuts off from the city of Yahuwah the wicked day by day, morning by morning, he does it, right? That one is one of the Psalms titled by Dawid or by David in English, which in the Hebrew is synonymous with concerning the beloved. And it's actually used that way in the apostolic constitutions as meaning it's concerning the beloved, either speaking in his person or about him. And all of those Psalms are in that capacity. This is the part that I really wanted to get to here. It says, in addition to these things, he also appointed a place in which alone it should be lawful to them to sacrifice to Yahuwah, what he was just enjoining, where his name dwells. And all this was arranged with this view, that when the fitting time should come, and they should learn by means of Yahushua that Yahuwah desires mercy and not sacrifice, and they might see him who should teach them that the place chosen of Yahuwah, in which it was suitable that victims should be offered to Yahuwah, in which or in his wisdom or Hokmah, and that on the other hand they might hear that this place which seemed chosen for a time, often harassed as it had been by hostile invasions and plunderings, was at last to be wholly destroyed. And in order to impress this upon them, and this was because he said, look, the time is coming and now is where the true worshipers, we just mentioned that beforehand too, shall worship the Father in Ruach and in truth. And it was not the place that they were going to be doing it at, but the condition in which you do it in. This is even before the coming of Yahushua, who was to reject at once the sacrifices and the place. It was often plundered by enemies and burnt with fire, and the people carried into captivity among foreign tribes, and then brought back when they betook themselves to the mercy of Yahuwah, that by these things they might be taught that a people who offer sacrifices are driven away and delivered up into the hands of the enemy, but they who do mercy and righteousness are without sacrifices freed from captivity and restored to their native land. And these are facts that are unequivocal. You can't get around it. He's trying to show us through example the way he wants us to be. It's not you can say all the prayers you want, you can do all the rituals that you want, but if you don't keep it with his intent, if you don't do things with love's purpose in your heart, it does not amount to something that is worthy of him, which is something that we were talking about a little bit earlier too. But all of this was to teach his people in the course of time these things. It says, but it fell out that very few comprehended this. For the greater number, though they could perceive and observe these things, yet were held by the irrational opinion of the common or vulgar. For right opinion with liberty is the exclusive right of a few. And that's another way of saying that many are called, but few are chosen. His chosen are the ones to whom all creation exists. It's the purpose of why we're here. All right, so to continue here, So, and it's we were talking about, and you shall go to the city of to the city to the name or to the name he his name there and be called upon, and you shall even seek him out and go there. And you shall carry there your whole burnt offerings and your sacrifices and your first fruits and your vowed offerings and your freewill offerings and your offerings of thanksgiving, the firstborn of your herds and of your flocks. And you shall eat there before Yahuwah your Elohim, and you shall rejoice in all the things on which you shall lay your hand, you and your houses, as Yahuwah your Elohim has blessed you. You shall not do altogether as we do here today, every man that which is pleasing in his own sight. And that's one thing that we all have to learn, not to just do whatever we feel like is right, but to do what he said. For hitherto you have not arrived at the rest and the inheritance which Yahuwah our Elohim gives you. And you shall go over Yarden, or he will come down in judgment, and shall dwell in the land which Yahuwah our Elohim takes as an inheritance for you, and he shall give you rest from all your enemies round about, and you shall dwell safely. And there shall be a place which Yahuwah your Elohim shall choose for his name to be called there. There shall you bring all things that I order you today, your whole burnt offerings, your sacrifices, and your tithes, and the firstfruits of your hands, and every choice gift of yours, whatsoever you shall vow to Yahuwah your Elohim. And you shall rejoice before Yahuwah your Elohim, you and your sons and your daughters, and your manservants and your maidservants, and the Luiim that is at your gates, because he has no portion or inheritance with you. Take heed to yourself that you offer not your whole burnt offerings in any place which you shall see, save in the place which Yahuwah your Elohim shall choose, in one of your tribes. There shall you offer your whole burnt offerings, and there shall you do all things whatsoever I charge you this day. But you shall kill according to all your desire, and shall eat flesh according to the blessing or barakah of Yahuwah your Elohim, which he has given you in every city. The unclean that is within you, and the clean shall eat it on equal terms, as the doe or the stag. Only you shall not eat the blood, you shall pour it on the ground as water. And Abraham, our forefather, in the other writings that we've covered in Yobelim and in the things that he enjoined to his children, were that you pour it out and cover it, that you don't eat with the blood, so that you don't bring a curse upon yourself. And you shall not be able to eat in your cities the tithe of your corn and of your wine and of your oil, the firstborn of your herd and of your flock, and all vows as many as you shall have vowed, and your thank offerings, and the first fruits of your hands. But before Yahuwah your Elohim you shall eat it, in the place which Yahuwah your Elohim shall choose for himself, you and your son and your daughter, and your manservant and your maidservant, and the stranger that is within your gates. And you shall rejoice before Yahuwah your Elohim, on whatsoever you shall lay your hand. Take heed to yourself that you do not desert the Luiim all the time that you live upon the land. And if Yahuwah your Elohim shall enlarge your borders, as he said to you, and you shall say, I will eat flesh. If your soul should desire to eat flesh, you shall eat flesh according to all the desire of your soul. And if the place be far from you, which Yahuwah your Elohim shall choose for himself, that his name be called upon it, then you shall kill of your herd and of your flock, which Yahuwah Elohim, or sorry, which Elohim shall have given you, even as I commanded you, and you shall eat in your cities according to the desire of your soul. Now, it doesn't say here that you had to have the Lui'im sacrifice them for you. It doesn't say it was a sacrifice at all. It just mentions you pour out the blood. The only place you offer sacrifices was at the Hikel, though. And that was the point of directing them to that place for when he came. As the dough and the stag are eaten, so shall you eat it. The unclean in you and the clean shall eat it in like manner. Take diligent heed that you eat no blood, for blood is the soul of it. The soul shall not be eaten with the flesh. They, almost everyone I know translates this as life, but if you look right here, the word is nephesh. You can look at any Hebrew translation or any one that I'm familiar with, and it will say nephesh there, which is the word for soul. Blood is dam, dalet, maim. I'm sorry, blood is dam, you know that right here, dalet, maim. But life, sorry, is chai. It's cheth yod or chaim. That's not the word for life. So please forgive me there. But it says, "You shall not eat it, you shall pour it on the ground as water. You shall not eat it, that it may be well with you and with your sons after you, if you shall do that which is tov and pleasing before Yahuwah your Elohim." And I don't know about other people. I don't really get into the details of stuff, but I remember that one of the known facts about Genghis Khan was that they regularly drank blood of their enemies and things. That's a practice that was an accursed thing. It's just like anything that he says not to do, doing that is one of those things that will always cause a problem. And in his word, he tells us what that's about. So the reason why we should not do that doesn't matter if it's animal or otherwise. It's a big no-no. It says, "And you shall not eat it, that it may be well with you and with your sons after you, if you shall do that which is tov and pleasing in the sight of Yahuwah your Elohim. But you shall take your set apart things, if you have any, and your vowed offerings, and come to the place which Yahuwah your Elohim shall choose to have his name named upon it. And you shall sacrifice your whole burnt offerings. You shall offer the flesh upon the altar of Yahuwah your Elohim, but the blood of your sacrifices you shall pour out at the foot of the altar of Yahuwah your Elohim. But the flesh you shall eat it." And I never actually thought about that as a parable before, but the blood being poured out at the foot of the altar is like our Mashiach's blood being poured out at his feet, and then what happened there. Everything being done as a parable of what would be, and all of the offerings alluding to him in one way or the other. It says, "Beware and hearken, and you shall do all the commands which I charge you, that it may be well with you and with your sons forever. If you shall do that which is pleasing and tov before Yahuwah your Elohim. And if Yahuwah your Elohim shall utterly destroy the nations to whom you go in thither to inherit their land from before you, and you shall inherit it and dwell in their land, take heed to yourself that you seek not to follow them after they are destroyed before you, saying, How do these nations act towards their mighty ones? I will do likewise. You shall not do so to your Elohim. For they have sacrificed to their Elohim the abominations of which Yahuwah, sorry, for they have sacrificed to their Elohim the abominations of Yahuwah which he hates. For they burn their sons and their daughters in fire to their Elohim. Every word that I command you this day, it shall you observe to do. You shall not add to it, nor diminish from it. So the fact that they commit they do things to their children, they do rituals and sacrifices to their children to these false mighty ones on these days is the reason why we're not to follow or observe them. That's never changed, right? Deuteronomy 13. And this one right here is I mean, a lot of people, we overlook it so easily, but this is the key to comprehending who is a false foreteller and who is speaking the truth, right? Enticers to idolatry, how near soever unto you, are to be stoned to death. Physical, literal then, spiritual now. You don't stone them with stones. You give them the Father and the Son united, echad in the word, eben, which eben is ab and ben, Father and Son, which is the word for stone. But when the two are one and the word is in agreement, like idolaters, witches, liars, cowards, blasphemers, everyone who loves and does falsehood, practices and does falsehood, they'll have their part in the lake of fire. These are things that are true, right? That is the stoning to death or the dashing of Edom's children against the stones. They did it literally. We're supposed to spiritually do it. And it's anyone who falls on this rock shall be uh, I want to get that right, but our Mashiach said that everyone who humbles himself shall be broken, and everyone on whom this rock crushes, they'll be pulverized. And then idolatrous cities are not to be spared. Not a person, even if it's your wife, and not an entire city. If they're trying to entice you to follow Elohim Akrim, anyone other than Yahuwah, your Elohim. And that's the key. It says, and if there arise within you a foreteller, or one who dreams a dream, and he gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder come to pass, which he spoke to you, saying, let us go and serve other Elohim which you know not. You shall not hearken to the words of that foreteller, or the dreamer of that dream, because Yahuwah your Elohim tries you to know whether you love to know whether you love your Elohim with all your heart and with all your inner being. And you shall follow Yahuwah your Elohim and fear him. And you shall hear his voice and attach yourselves to him. And that foreteller or that dreamer of a dream shall die, for he has spoken to make you heir from Yahuwah your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, who redeemed you from bondage, to thrust you out of the way which Yahuwah your Elohim commanded you to walk in. So shall you abolish the evil from among you. And again, when they were in the land and as they were doing these things, they were the instruments of his judgment, which is why they were self-executing these commandments given to them to do these things. They were the responsible party as his body in the world. Their dereliction of their duty is what caused them problems. Just like in our country, in America, the people are sovereign. It's our duty to enforce the Constitution, the covenant that our servants are supposed to have the sword and oath to uphold, which is our covenant with our Creator. And if your brother by your father or mother, or your son or daughter, or the wife in your bosom, or friend who is equal to your own soul, entreat you secretly, saying, let us go and serve other Elohim, which neither you nor your fathers have known, of the Elohim of the nations that are round about you, who are near to you, or at a distance from you, from one end of the earth to the other end, to the other, You shall not consent to him, neither shall you hearken to him, and your eye shall not spare him. You shall feel no regret for him, neither shall you at all protect him. You shall surely report concerning him, and your hands shall be upon him among the first to slay him, and the hands of all the people at the last. And this is what it means to love Yahuwah your Elohim first and above all things, because this is apostasy from your father. And they shall stone him with stones, and he shall die, because he sought to draw you away from Yahuwah your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of the house of bondage. And all Yisrael shall hear and fear, and shall not again do according to this evil thing among you. And if in one of your cities, which Yahuwah Elohim gives you to dwell therein, you shall hear men saying, evil men have gone out from you, and have caused all the inhabitants of their land to fall away, saying, let us go and worship other Elohim, whom you knew not. Then you shall inquire and ask and search diligently, and behold, if the thing is clearly true, and this abomination has taken place among you, you shall utterly destroy all the dwellers in that land with the edge of the sword. You shall solemnly curse it and all things in it. And all its spoil you shall gather into its public ways, and you shall burn the city with fire, and all its spoils publicly before Yahuwah your Elohim, and it shall be uninhabited forever. It shall not be built again. And there shall be nothing of the cursed thing cleave to your hand, that Yahuwah may turn from his fierce anger, and show you mercy, and pity you, and multiply you as he sware to your fathers. If you will hear the voice of Yahuwah your Elohim, to keep his commandments, all that I charge you this day, to do that which is tov and pleasing before Yahuwah your Elohim. All right, sounds like we have at least one more here. Just one moment. All right, we're on chapter 14 here, Dabarim, and this is Elohim's children are not to disfigure themselves in mourning. What may and what may not be eaten of beasts, of fishes, of fowls, that which dies of itself may not be eaten. Tithes of Elohim's service, tithes of firstlings of rejoicing before Yahuwah, and the third year tithes of alms and charity. So you see the three tithes that are mentioned here, and these are continued, I do believe, in the apostolic constitutions, although it's not mentioned in a breakdown in such a manner. But you bring your offerings to the assembly instead of the temple now. What you would give for the use of the Kohen would go to your overseer, and what you would have for the use of those that are in need would be distributed in the assemblies amongst local peoples, the believer first as needed, right? But we'll get to those more in the course of time. If you keep in mind that what was done nationally in one place here was meant to be distributed throughout the world, not in a locality, but in every place that he had a foothold or dominion where his people wanted to dwell and worship him. So chapter 14 here. Sorry, yeah. It says, you are the children of Yahuwah, your Elohim. This is, and it's called a blessed thing to be called. Is it wonderful to be called the children of Elohim in the renewed covenant? But you can see it's right here, Deuteronomy 14. We're his children when we do his will. When we are his steadfast children, we listen to the will of our Father, right? It says, and you are the children of Yahuwah your Elohim. You shall not make any baldness between your eyes for the dead. For you are a set apart people to Yahuwah your Elohim, And Yahuwah, your Elohim, has chosen you to be a peculiar people to himself of all the nations on the face of the earth. That's Segula, as I mentioned to you before, a peculiar treasure. You shall not eat any abominable thing. And that injunction has never been changed. It says, who takes the clean from the unclean? No one. That was in Job, right? Who makes an abomination? Not one. You don't. And if we are to be his temples today, if the dwelling place of Elohim is in you, you should not be bringing unclean offerings into it. That's just, that's common sense. And this is why everyone that, if you really want to know how to be healthy, how to serve your maker, and to truly do things right, you can start, if you haven't, by the things you're eating, by the things that you're consuming, both with your mind on what you choose to read, think upon, and then eat physically. It says, these are the beasts which you shall eat: the calf of the herd, the lamb of the sheep, the kid of the goats, the stag, the doe, the pygarg, and the wild goat, and the camleopard. And I'll be honest, I don't know what this is at all. The camelopards. Okay, it's the giraffe, the camel leopard, the camel-like leopard, the leopard with spots. Now that makes sense to me. Okay. Every beast that divides the hooves and makes claws of two divisions, and that's the key. All of these animals have a hoof completely divided and they chew the cud, right? And that chews the cud among beasts, these you shall eat. The chewing the cud it means they have a rudimentary stomach, or they have multiple stomachs where they regurgitate, chew, and they bring it back. It's reminiscent of bringing up the things that you've been given to chew on them again, to, like think about it, to digest it better. So it's more beneficial to your body or your nourishment, if you can see the picture there. And these are both animals that we're supposed to consume physically and characteristics that we're supposed to emulate spiritually. And in the reverse of that, all the unclean animals have characteristics we are to abstain from. It says, every beast that divides the hoofs and makes claws of two divisions, and that chews the cud among beasts, these you shall eat. And these you shall not eat of them that chew the cud, and of those that divide the hooves, and make distinct claws: the camel, and the hare, and the rabbit, because they chew the cud, but do not divide the hoof. These are unclean to you. And as for the swine, because he divides the hoof, and makes claws of the hoof, yet he chews not the cud, he is unclean to you. You shall not eat of their flesh, you shall not touch their dead bodies. And the fact that they're so disease ridden and disgusting, it was a health issue to do so, right? Now, today, you're not unclean by touching a dead pig. These things are that's the added bonds that we are no longer to regard. There is no washings that you have to do to make yourself ritually clean. There's no animal sacrifices that you must give, or a ritual that you have to do to purify yourself. You are clean because of the words he's spoken to you. That is the renewed covenant. So we have to make sure we believe correctly and we comprehend things as they are as time has gone on. At this point in time, he was teaching with these physical reminders because they would not keep the simplicity of the news, the good news as it was given to them. They broke the law and added bonds were given. However, some things were never taken away. The dietary laws were never changed. The appointed times were never changed on saying you no longer have to keep them. On the contrary, if you recall, we've read, it mentions very specifically about what parts of them you are to do and remember for every generation in all your dwellings forever. And there's some that are specific that when you go into the land, you are to do such and such. And it says, and these you shall eat of all that are in the water. You shall eat all that have fins and scales, and all that have not fins and scales you shall not eat. They are unclean to you. You shall eat every clean bird, and these of them you shall not eat. The eagle and the osprey or the osprey, and the seagull, and the vulture, and the kite, and the like to it. It says 14 is absent from the manuscript. It says, in every raven after his kind. That word is oreb there. Ayin resh bet, the same word for dusky, evening, or mixture, like Arab. And the sparrow and the owl and the seamew and the heron and the swan. 16 there. 10 semeth is a hard breather. Okay. And the stork and the cormorant and the hawk and its like, and the hopi and the raven, although it has the raven again, or it says and the bat here. Oh no, that was there. Okay, so it doesn't have it here, but it has it there because it's missing from the other one. So, and the pelican and the diver and the like to it, and the red bill and the bat. All winged animals that creep are unclean to you. You shall not eat of them, which means like flies, bees, everything but the locusts, right? You shall eat every clean bird, and you shall eat nothing that dies of itself. It shall be given to the sojourner in your cities, and he shall eat it, or you shall sell it to a stranger, because you are a set apart people to Yahuwah your Elohim. You shall not boil a lamb or a goat in his mother's milk. Yeah, it says you shall not see the kid, that gedai, that's literally the word where we get a kid in English. It means a baby goat. This one says lamb, which is not accurate. But the premise is the same. You don't cook a baby in its mother's milk. You shall tithe the tenth of all the produce of your seed, the fruit of your field, year by year. And you shall eat it in the place which Yahuwah your Elohim shall choose to have his name called there. You shall bring the tithe of your corn and of your wine and of your oil, the firstborn of your herd and of your flock, that you may learn to fear Yahuwah your Elohim always. And if your journey be too hard for you, and you are not able to bring them, because the place is far from you which Yahuwah your Elohim shall choose to have his name called there, because Yahuwah your Elohim will barak you, then you shall sell them for money, and you shall take the money in your hands, and you shall go to the place which Yahuwah your Elohim shall choose, and you shall give the money for whatsoever your inner being shall desire, for oxen, or for sheep, or for wine, or you shall lay it out on strong drink, or on whatsoever your inner being may desire, and you shall eat there before Yahuwah your Elohim, and you shall rejoice, and your house. And the Lui'im that is in your cities, because he has not a portion or inheritance with you, after 3 years you shall bring out all the tithes of your fruits. In that year you shall lay it up in your cities. And the Lui'im shall come, because he has no part or lot with you, and the stranger, and the orphan, and the widow which is in your cities, and they shall eat and be filled, that Yahuwah your Elohim may barak you in all the works which you shall do. All right. right. I think maybe this one could be our last for today. We have a little bit more before we have to stop. This is Debarim, Deuteronomy 15, and it says, the seventh year, a year of release for the poor, what they call the Shemitah. And we've talked about it before, but I don't know if I've ever mentioned it on the recordings here. There's evidence to show that Yahushua was born in 2 BC, and that happens to be a Shemitah. It lines up with the Shemitah when you consider that the year Herod came back into the land to get control of it and get dominion of the kingdom by force with the help of Rome was in the Shemitah and land, or in the Yobelim of 23 BC or something to that effect. And then you can do the 777, and it's 2 BC when he was born, 7 7, a few more. And then in that next Yobelim, or the year of the Yobel, that was in 28 AD when Yahushua was announcing the year of Yahuwah Melchizedek's favor, when he read from the scroll of Yeshayahu and said, this is now fulfilled in your hearing. So whether or not that was the 80th Yobel from creation exactly, which would be 3,921 years Anno Mundi, um, I don't know exactly. I can't say for sure. The only witness that we have of that I'm familiar with is a footnote in one of the writings from Josephus about that Yobel for Herod, and then you would do the Yobel for when he announced it. But that's part of the things that we're still trying to learn. If anyone has information on that, please share it with us. I'd be greatly interested in learning about those. I know that there's a lot of stuff about the Shemitahs and things with the sighted moon, gentlemen, but I would just ask you to look at the fruits that are being produced and then consider that our Creator doesn't have to work through those. If it's not peaceable, and if it's not being given for free, it's probably not going to be accurate either. That being said, if you do have any information about the Yobelim in relation to 28 AD and what Jubilee that could have been from creation, I'm very interested in learning. So thank you. Anyways, it says, it must not be let or of lending or giving. An Hebrew servant, except he will not depart, must in the seventh year go forth free and well furnished, which is another crime that we're committing against the common law here by having debt that lasts more than 7 years in our country. Right. All firstling males of the cattle are to be sacrificed unto Yahuwah. It says, every 7 years you shall make a release, and this the ordinance of the release. You shall remit every private debt which your neighbor owes you, and you shall not ask payment of it from your brother. For it has been called a release to Yahuwah your Elohim. Of a stranger you shall ask again whatsoever he has of yours, but your brother you shall remit his debt to you. For there shall not be a poor man or person in the midst of you. For Yahuwah your Elohim will surely barak you in the land which Yahuwah your Elohim gives you by inheritance, that you should inherit it. And if you shall indeed hearken to the voice of Yahuwah your Elohim, to keep and do all these commandments, as many as I charge you this day, for Yahuwah your Elohim has barak you, or blessed you, in the way of which he spoke to you, then you shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. And you shall rule over many nations, but they shall not rule over you. And these blessings were culminated over our people in America and the British Empire during the times where the people were generally obedient to the injunctions of the good news. It was fulfilled in them when they were blind and lame. As I was talking to you, it mentions in the foretellers of when he would lead the people, the blind people, in the way, and the lame would be able to go where they were not able. My point in saying those is there are books written on these times where it was seen that the Meloha Goyim, or the fullness of the nations coming in, was the culmination of the British Empire and the company of nations attached to it, and the fulfillment of the promises and the blessings of the birthright promises given to Abraham that were passed down to Yitzhak, Jacob, and then onto Yahusuf and his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. It was in them that you see these fulfilled. Not all 12 tribes, but just the two. That means that there's still 11 other tribes throughout the world there in some fashion to be regarded. Not that they're not existent and not that they're not fulfilling foretellings. It's just those ones and that promise was not given to them. And this is a big thing that a lot of people are divisive about, because they'll say all Israel is just the British Empire. And while all Israel is represented, like literally all the tribes are represented in Britain and in America in some capacity, they are represented in foretelling as one of the 12 or 13, if you will. It says, and if there shall be in the midst of you a poor man of your brethren in one of your cities in the land which Yahuwah your Elohim gives you, you shall not harden your heart, neither shall you by any means close up your hand from your brother who is in want. All right. Sorry, Sister Rosie just asked a question. It says, so in the Ruachni, do these two represent them all 12 tribes? Um, no, there's in this, the spiritual application in scripture, you have the tribe that you are called by is the one that you sojourn with. It doesn't mean that you belong to it. Everyone in the land was called of Yahuda, even though there were some of Louis, some of Benjamin, some of Asher, and uh, there was, I think, one of Asher and another one that was mentioned in the scriptures in the renewed covenant times. They were all called of Yahuda because they sojourned with Yahuda. So everyone that's in America would generally be called Manasseh for prophetic purposes. Everyone in Britain or anywhere in the Commonwealth there would be known as Ephraim, whether they were of Ephraim literally or not. The ones that were of Gad would be where Gad is. Okay. Now, where they are and those differences, that's what I'm not covering exactly, because I don't know all the nuances for every tribe. All of the 12 tribes were represented in Europe, in the belly of the beast, if you will, but um, they didn't all stay there. Manasseh is in America. A half tribe I also believe is in Germany, because a great part of them came over to America in waves as it became a free nation. And it was the patterns there. The Saxons were also named there, but that's a different thing for a different time. Gad, I believe, is Spain and South America, based on the evidence from Tay Taffy and from the foretellings. Gad and Reuben being with Manasseh on the other side of the waters would be like Canada and South America being with the North America, or the US on the other side of the waters. So there's allusions to those things. And then how France represents and fulfills the things that happened to Reuben also carries over with France there. Holland being Zebulun and the things that they did with helping believers. Um, there's a few others where you can pair them. Dan with Denmark and the Irish Roman Catholics. Louis is spread throughout, but one thing that people don't might not want to regard is Louis the Kahuna. Louis was the one that betrayed him, right? It was the sons of Aharon that betrayed the truth there and condemned him to die. They're also culpable for what you'd say was Roman Catholicism. Yeah, it is pretty mixed there. And that's not counting the branches that spread off to different places as well in Africa and the Far East and other places. There were waves that came to America before the Europeans that were also part of the tribes too. So there's a lot of history involved, and it's not just one what you call one ethnic group. Although the massive majority of what you can call the Caucasian people are the bulk, the Germanic peoples that came into Europe are a dominant portion of the 12 tribes. That's just a fact of history. It doesn't mean that they're the only ones, though. You're welcome, sister. All right. Verse 15, it says, "And if there shall be in the midst of you a poor man of your brethren in one of your cities and in the land which Yahuwah your Elohim gives you, you shall not harden your heart, neither shall you by any means close up your hand from your brother who is in want. You shall surely open your hands to him. You shall lend to him as much as he wants according to his need. Take heed to yourself that there be not a secret thing in your heart, an iniquity, saying the seventh year, the year of release, draws nigh. And your eye shall be evil to your brother that is in want, and you shall not give to him, and he shall cry against you to Yahuwah, and there shall be great sin in you. You shall surely give to him, and you shall lend him as much as he wants, according as he is in need, and you shall not grudge in your heart as you give to him. Because on this account Yahuwah your Elohim will barak you in all your works, and in all things on which you shall lay your hand. And this is, I want you to think about Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus was a man who gave away half of his money to the poor. Right off the bat, gave half of it away. On top of that, if there was even an accusation against him of any wrongdoing, he repaid them fourfold. Not if it was proven, not if it was legitimate, but just the accusation of a wrong. And because of his disposition, he was filthy rich. He couldn't get rid of the money enough he had so much of it because you cannot outgive your maker. His disposition was such that he was brought into the gift of being an overseer of the assembly of Caesarea Stratanos. And you find that in the recognitions that we just shared a little bit ago. It's also mentioned that he was one that was ordained by Kepha in Caesarea in the apostolic constitutions. It says, "For the poor shall not fail off your land. Therefore I charge you to do this thing, saying, you shall surely open your hands to your poor brother, and to him that is distressed upon the land, or your land. And if your brother or sister," now it says that in a bracket here, which I'm not okay with just adding things because you feel like it. But in the Dead Sea Scrolls, it gives an example of a law about a brother and his brother's daughter. And then it goes on to say, now, just because it doesn't mention your sister's son or your sister's daughter or any other combination or mix, every one of them is applicable in the way it's meant to be. It's not just that one, and you can skim around this any way you want to. So, and if your brother or Hebrew or a Hebrew woman be sold to you, he shall serve you 6 years, and in the seventh year you shall send him out from you free, or out free from you. And when you shall send him out free from you, you shall not send him out empty. You shall give him provision for the way from your flock, and from your corn, and from your wine. As Yahuwah your Elohim has baraked you, or blessed you, you shall give to him. And this is like repaying the wages of working for them as Yaakov did with Laban, right? And you shall remember that you were a servant in the land of Mitzrayim, and Yahuwah your Elohim redeemed you from thence. Therefore I charge you to do this thing. And if you should say, and if he should say to you, I will not go out from you, because he continues to love you and your house, because he is well with you, then you shall take an owl and bore his ear through to the door, and he shall be your servant forever. And in like manner shall you do to your maidservant. And it shall not seem hard to you when they are sent out free from you, because he has served you 6 years according to the annual hire of a hireling. So Yahuwah your Elohim shall barak you in all things whatsoever you may do. Every firstborn that shall be born among your kin or kine and your sheep, you shall set apart the males to Yahuwah your Elohim. You shall not work with your firstborn calf, and you shall not shear the firstborn of your sheep. You shall eat it before Yahuwah year by year in the place which Yahuwah your Elohim shall choose, you and your house. And if there be in it a blemish, if it be lame or blind, an evil blemish, you shall not sacrifice it to Yahuwah your Elohim. You shall eat it in your cities, the unclean in you, and the clean shall eat it in like manner, as the doe or the stag. Now, people don't think about this too much, but the unclean can eat of these animals in your cities, but they can't eat it in his city. The unclean are not, at this point, were not allowed in Yerushalayim. You had to be ritually clean of semen or touching a dead body before you could be there. And that was another thing representative of like the millennial reign, or being not coming near your wife at that time on the Sabbath. You can't go to worship him there and be unclean. A lot of people are contentious about that because it plainly says in the book of Yobalim what you have to think about and see that it's true elsewhere. But if you do that, you can see, and it directly mentions in the Dead Sea Scrolls that no chickens or dogs were allowed in the city because it was set apart. You couldn't be unclean in there at the time, and they didn't want those animals eating the bones of animals that were set apart, or for the dogs specifically, the chickens because of the mess they made. But it says, and you shall eat it in your cities, the unclean and the clean, or the unclean in you, and the clean shall eat it in like manner as the doe or the stag. Only you shall not eat the blood, you shall pour it out on the earth as water. All right, I think that's about it for today. So we'll continue with Debarim or Deuteronomy 16 next week. And I hope this was edifying for everyone. Please feel free if you have any questions, comments, or anything you want to share, you can do so. And you all have a great Sabbath, Shabbat Shalom, and a great week ahead, a Shavua Tov, and we will see you later.